I had always believed that family disagreements could be solved with patience, conversation, and compromise. That belief shattered the night my son Ethan married Juliet. What should have been a joyful celebration turned into the darkest turning point of my life. The ballroom was glittering, filled with laughter, champagne glasses clinking, and music that should have marked the happiest evening for two young people. I had been sitting quietly at my table, smiling politely, watching the newlyweds move from guest to guest. My plan was simple: remain supportive, avoid any conflict, and keep my dignity intact. But as the evening progressed, Juliet approached me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She leaned down so no one else could hear and whispered, "The keys, hand them over tonight, Aurora. Ethan and I deserve a real home now." At first I thought I had misheard. The keys, she meant the keys to my apartment. The home I had built over decades of hard work, filled with memories of my late husband and every stage of Ethan's childhood. I forced a polite laugh, hoping she was joking. But Juliet's expression hardened. "This is not a request," she added sharply. "Either you give us the apartment tonight, or everyone will see the truth about how selfish you really are." My heart pounded. I had known Juliet was ambitious, perhaps even manipulative, but I had never imagined she would confront me so brazenly on her wedding night. Ethan, standing a few feet away, pretended not to hear. That silence cut me deeper than any words could have. I whispered back, "Juliet, this isn't the time. We can talk another day." But Juliet didn't want another day. She wanted victory publicly. Her hand shot out, and before I could react, she slapped me. The sound echoed through the music, through the laughter, through my very soul. For a moment, the room froze. Guests turned, whispers rising like a storm. My cheek burned, but the greater pain came from the realization that my son didn't move to defend me. He didn't even look ashamed. Instead, he stepped closer to Juliet, placing a hand on her shoulder as if to comfort her. "She's always been difficult," Juliet announced loudly, tears springing into her eyes with theatrical precision. "She promised us a home, and now she's trying to humiliate us on our wedding day." I stood there trembling, not from the slap, but from the injustice. The gasps of the guests, the confused stares, the murmurs of disapproval, they all pressed against me like a wave. I tried to speak, to explain that I had promised nothing, that I had simply wanted to keep the little sanctuary I had left. But the words lodged in my throat. Joseph, my neighbor and closest friend, hurried to my side. "Aurora, come with me," he urged softly, guiding me toward the exit. His presence kept me from collapsing. Behind us I heard Juliet's sobs, and Ethan's voice trying to calm the crowd. As the cold night air hit my face outside the bar, I touched my swollen cheek, and finally let the tears fall. Joseph handed me a handkerchief. "Don't let them break you," he whispered, but I already felt something inside me cracking. That night marked the beginning of a battle I had never expected to fight. A battle not for property or reputation, but for my dignity, my sanity, my place in a family that suddenly treated me like an obstacle. I went home alone, the echo of the slap still ringing in my ears. On my kitchen table lay the spare set of apartment keys Juliet had demanded. I stared at them for hours, realizing they had become more than just metal objects. They were symbols of my independence, my worth, my past, and my future. And I knew then if Juliet and Ethan wanted to take them from me, they would have to fight for them. The morning after the wedding, I woke with a dull ache across my cheek and a heavier ache in my heart. Sleep had been nearly impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the echo of Juliet's slap and saw the shocked faces of the guests. Worse, I saw Ethan's silence. My son, the boy I had carried in my arms, the young man I had once believed would protect me as fiercely as I had protected him, had stood motionless. My phone buzzed constantly. Messages flooded in from relatives and friends, some pretending they hadn't seen what happened, others offering shallow comfort. But a few messages stung with accusation. "Why did you embarrass them? Why didn't you just give them the apartment? as if a lifetime of sacrifice could be erased with a single gift. By noon, I turned the phone face down. I couldn't bear it anymore. Joseph came over carrying a bag of fresh bread and cheese from the local bakery. His kindness was steady, like the sun rising each morning, no matter how stormy the night before. "Eat something," he urged. "You'll need strength. This isn't over." I wanted to laugh at the absurdity. Strength for what, Joseph? It was a slap, a scene. Soon people will forget. But Joseph shook his head. "Juliet won't forget. And Ethan won't stop her. They've shown their hand, Aurora. This was never about love. It was about what they think they can take from you." His words chilled me. Later that afternoon, Lucy arrived. My niece, bright and full of fire, had been at the wedding too. She hugged me tightly, refusing to let go. "Aunt Aurora," she whispered, "you don't know what people are saying. Juliet is already telling everyone you promised her the apartment. She says you broke your word in front of everyone." "That's a lie," I said, anger rising. "I never promised her anything." "I know," Lucy replied, her eyes fierce, "but perception spreads faster than truth. They're painting you as unstable, manipulative, even cruel. You need to be prepared." Prepared for what? I wanted to scream. Prepared to be betrayed by my only son? Prepared to be treated as if I were disposable. But deep inside, I knew Lucy and Joseph were right. Something darker was unfolding. That evening I finally listened to the voicemail Ethan had left. His voice was cold, formal, like speaking to a stranger. "Mother, I think you owe Juliet and me an apology for what happened last night. Your behavior was out of line, and unless you're willing to make this right, I don't see how we can move forward as a family." An apology. I owed them an apology. The words rattled in my chest. It was as if he had taken a knife and carefully twisted it where it hurt most. I sat in silence for hours. The apartment that had once felt like a safe haven now seemed heavy with shadows. Every corner whispered memories of Ethan as a child. The scraped knees, the birthdays, the laughter. And yet here I was, treated as an obstacle to be removed. At midnight, unable to sleep, I stood by the window overlooking the quiet street. A single thought took root. If Juliet and Ethan wanted to play a dangerous game, they had chosen the wrong opponent. For 68 years I had lived quietly, endured silently, and sacrificed endlessly. But that night, under the dim glow of the street lamp, I felt something I hadn't in years: resolve. This wasn't just about an apartment. This was about my dignity, my right to live without fear, and my refusal to be erased. The slap was only the beginning. 2 days passed, and the tension that had begun in the ballroom seeped into every corner of my life. The phone calls hadn't stopped, but the tone of them had changed. At first there had been curiosity, neighbors, acquaintances, distant relatives wanting the juicy details of the scandal. Now there was judgment. "Why would you humiliate Ethan on his wedding day?" One relative asked bluntly. "You have more than enough to live on. Why not give them the apartment?" Another insisted. Each accusation sliced deeper. It amazed me how quickly people forgot the years I had worked 2 jobs, the sacrifices I had made for Ethan's education, the countless nights I had gone without so he could have everything. And yet, in the blink of an eye, I was the villain. Joseph reminded me again and again, "They want to make you doubt yourself. Don't let them." But doubts came anyway, in waves that crashed hardest at night. On the 3rd evening, Lucy came over carrying a stack of printed pages. Her face was pale. "Aunt Aurora," she began, "you need to see this." She laid the papers on my kitchen table. They were screenshots from social media, posts Juliet had made. "Can you believe some parents would rather cling to their property than give their children a chance at happiness?" One read. Another was more cutting. "Last night should have been the best of my life, but selfishness and cruelty turned it into a nightmare. Pray for me as I deal with this pain." Thousands of people had commented, offering sympathy, sending heart emojis, praising her courage. Some even cursed me without knowing a single fact. I sank into a chair, my stomach twisting. She's turning the world against me. Lucy's eyes burned with fury. She's clever, I'll give her that. She's making you look unstable, greedy, vindictive. People love a good villain, Aunt Aurora, and she's casting you in that role. I stared at the pages, numb. And Ethan, I asked quietly. He's silent, Lucy said. But his silence is consent. That night, for the first time, I locked every door and window in my apartment. Not because I feared Juliet would come for me, but because I felt the walls of my own family closing in. My home, once a sanctuary, was turning into a battlefield. The next morning, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address, just my name written in a hand I didn't recognize. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Give them the apartment before things get ugly. Families that fight in public are remembered forever. My hands trembled as I read it. Was it a threat, a warning, or just one more attempt to scare me into submission? Joseph, upon seeing it, folded the letter calmly. Keep everything, Aurora. Every message, every threat. If this escalates, you'll need proof. Proof. The word echoed in my mind. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just a family feud, it was becoming a campaign. A carefully orchestrated effort to strip me of my dignity, my credibility, maybe even my freedom to decide for myself. That evening, I stood before the mirror and touched the faint bruise still lingering on my cheek. I whispered to my reflection, "They want war? Then war is what they'll get." And for the first time in years, my own eyes looked back at me, not with fear but with fire. It was a gray afternoon when the knock came at my door. Sharp, insistent, like someone determined not to be ignored. I opened it, and there she was. Juliet. No makeup this time, her hair pulled back tightly, but her eyes still carried that same glint of calculation. "May I come in?" she asked, though she was already stepping past me. The air seemed to shrink as she walked into my living room, glancing at the photos on my wall, the books on my shelves, the plants by the window. She touched none of them, but her eyes lingered as though she were cataloging my possessions. "I came to clear the air," she said, finally turning to me. I folded my arms. "Clear the air, or claim what you think is yours." Her smile was thin, humorless. "Aurora, you and I both know this apartment is wasted on you. You live alone, you're aging, and sooner or later you won't be able to manage. Ethan and we need space to build a family. It's practical." "Practical?" I echoed. "Do you hear yourself? You slapped me, Juliet. You humiliated me in front of everyone. And now you expect me to hand you my home as if nothing happened." She sighed dramatically, as though I were a stubborn child. "You're letting emotions cloud your judgment. Be reasonable. This isn't theft, it's transition. A generational shift." Her words stung because they carried the polish of rehearsed arguments, phrases crafted to sound rational while dripping with entitlement. I shook my head slowly. My parents worked themselves to the bone, so I could have security. I worked every day of my life to keep this roof over my head, and you dare call it a transition? Juliet, what you want isn't a gift, it's plunder. For a flicker of a second, her face hardened, the mask slipping. Then just as quickly she smoothed it over with feigned sympathy. "You're lonely, Aurora. Everyone sees it. Maybe if you trusted us you wouldn't be so isolated. Think about how people talk. Do you really want to be remembered as the bitter old woman who destroyed her son's happiness?" The audacity left me speechless. She was using the same weapon Ethan often wielded, shame. A dagger aimed straight at my deepest fears. Finally I found my voice. "Better a bitter woman than a broken one. Now get out of my house." Her eyes flashed with anger. For a moment I thought she might strike me again. Instead she leaned closer, her whisper laced with venom. "You'll regret this. People already think you've lost your mind. Keep pushing, and you'll be completely alone." And with that she turned and swept out, leaving the faint scent of her perfume mingled with the stench of her threat. I stood there shaking, but not from fear, from rage. The walls of my apartment had heard her words, absorbed them, and now they seemed to echo with a vow. "Not alone. not broken, not defeated. When Joseph came by later that evening, I told him everything. He listened quietly, then placed his hand on mine. "Aurora," he said firmly, "they underestimate you. That's their greatest mistake." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Juliet believed she had planted seeds of doubt, but what she had really done was ignite something else entirely. Resolve. And with that resolve, I began to sketch the outlines of a plan. The following week was a blur of whispers, half-truths, and sideways glances. Word had spread fast in the neighborhood. I could feel it in the way people paused when I entered the grocery store, how conversations stopped abruptly when I walked into the cafe. It wasn't hard to guess why. Juliet's version of the story was circulating like wildfire. She's losing her grip. She slapped her daughter-in-law. No, it was the other way around, wasn't it? Each retelling twisted the truth further, until I was painted as a bitter, unstable woman clinging to her possessions out of spite. Lucy tried to shield me. She deleted cruel comments online, blocked accounts, and distracted me with stories about her students. But I wasn't blind. I saw the storm gathering, and I knew it wouldn't stop at gossip. One afternoon, Joseph knocked on my door with his familiar steady rhythm. When I let him in, he carried a small stack of documents. "You need to prepare, Aurora," he said, his voice low. "Juliet's not just talking, she's planning." I frowned, taking the papers. They were printouts of property records, legal clauses, even notes on inheritance law. "Where did you get these?" "A friend at City Hall." She overheard Juliet asking questions about how property transfers work, about what happens if an elderly person is deemed unfit to manage their estate. My stomach dropped. "She wouldn't." "She would," Joseph interrupted gently. "And Ethan, he won't stop her. You know that." For a long moment I stared at the papers, the words blurring before my eyes. Deemed unfit. That phrase was a weapon. If Juliet could convince people I was unstable, irrational, incapable of managing my affairs, she wouldn't need my consent. The law itself would hand her the keys. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the building, every gust of wind rattling the windows sounded like a warning. I walked from room to room, touching the furniture, the photographs, the memories embedded in every corner. This apartment wasn't just walls and floors. It was my history, my identity. To lose it would be to lose myself. At dawn, I brewed a strong cup of coffee and sat at my desk with a notebook. If Juliet wanted to fight with manipulation, then I would fight with preparation. I began to list names: lawyers, social workers, former colleagues, anyone who could vouch for my stability and independence. By mid-morning, Lucy arrived, her eyes puffy from lack of sleep. "I've been thinking," she said, dropping her backpack on the chair. "You need to tell your story before they twist it beyond recognition. Not just to me or Joseph, but to the world." "The world doesn't want the messy truth," I said bitterly. "They want villains and victims." "Then show them you're neither," she shot back. "Show them you're a fighter." Her conviction lit a spark in me. Maybe she was right. Maybe silence had been my mistake. Juliet filled the air with her narrative because I had left it empty. It was time to claim my voice. That afternoon, Joseph called a friend who worked at a local newspaper. Within days, a journalist was sitting in my living room, recording every word as I recounted the slap, the threats, the letters, the visit. When the article was published, the headline cut through the noise. "Elderly woman stands up against family pressure, a battle for dignity." It didn't silence the critics, but it shifted the conversation. For every cruel comment, there was now a message of support. For every whisper of doubt, there was a voice of encouragement. Juliet had awakened a storm, but she had also awakened me. The article spread faster than I could have imagined. Within hours of publication, my phone lit up with messages, some kind, some cruel, many from people I hadn't spoken to in years. "Aurora, I saw the paper. You're so brave. Why drag family business into the streets? Shameful. My mother went through the same thing. Thank you for speaking up. Each message was a reminder that I had stepped into a battlefield far larger than my apartment. I wasn't just fighting Juliet anymore. I was fighting the silent culture that told older people to stay quiet, to endure, to sacrifice until there was nothing left. Lucy read every comment aloud, her voice trembling when the words were harsh. Joseph, more pragmatic, told me to ignore them. But I knew better. Words were weapons, and Juliet had mastered them. A week later, the phone rang with a call I had dreaded and expected in equal measure. It was Ethan. "Mom, what have you done?" His voice was tight, clipped, almost panicked. "I told the truth," I replied evenly. "You humiliated us. Do you have any idea what this is doing to Juliet? To me? I know what you both tried to do to me," I said. "The truth doesn't humiliate. Actions do." For a moment silence hung between us. Then his voice hardened. "You're forcing my hand. If you keep this up, we'll have no choice but to pursue legal action." I swallowed hard. "Do what you must, Ethan. But remember, light exposes what thrives in the dark." He hung up without another word. That night, Joseph stayed over. "He's bluffing," he said, though I saw the doubt in his eyes. "Juliet wants to scare you into silence. Don't let them." But the next morning, an official letter arrived. Summons for a preliminary hearing. Juliet and Ethan petitioning the court to evaluate my capacity to manage my finances and property. The paper shook in my hands as I read the words. Deemed incompetent. Court-appointed guardian. Loss of rights. It was all there, printed in cold, indifferent ink. Lucy burst into tears when she saw it. "They can't do this. They can't just take away your life because she wants your apartment." "Oh, they can try," Joseph muttered grimly. For hours I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the letter. My mind raced through every memory. Christmas mornings, scraped knees I had kissed, bedtime stories whispered into the dark. Was this what motherhood had led me to? My own child standing beside the woman who struck me, both of them ready to declare me unfit for the life I had built. By evening I made my decision. "If it's a courtroom they want," I said quietly, "then it's a courtroom they get. But they won't find a frail woman too scared to speak. They'll find me." Joseph placed a steady hand on mine. "Then we prepare. Line by line, fact by fact. We'll turn their weapon into their undoing." And so it began. The fight not just for my home, but for my very right to exist as a capable human being. Juliet thought she could strip me of dignity with a signature. She had no idea she had just given me a platform. The first step was finding an attorney who understood not just the law but the cruelty behind this kind of betrayal. Joseph introduced me to Carlos Mendez, a family law specialist with sharp eyes and a calm voice. From the moment he shook my hand, I sensed he understood. "Mrs. Hughes," he said gently, "this isn't just a legal battle. It's psychological warfare. They want to make you doubt yourself, so the court will too. But I've handled cases like this before, and I assure you truth is on your side." Hearing those words felt like breathing again after weeks underwater. Carlos asked me to gather everything: letters, financial records, photographs, even diary entries. "Documentation is power," he explained. "We'll turn every insult they've thrown at you into evidence of their manipulation." For 3 days my apartment turned into a war room. Papers covered the dining table, photos lined the walls, and Lucy typed tirelessly at her laptop, cataloging each detail. Joseph brewed endless pots of coffee, and kept our spirits up with dry humor. At night, when exhaustion blurred my vision, I thought of Juliet's hand striking my cheek. That single moment had set all of this into motion. Painful as it was, it had also ignited something inside me, a refusal to be erased. One evening Carlos returned with news. "They've submitted affidavits from several wedding guests," he said, spreading papers before us. "Claims that you were irrational, hostile, even unstable that night." My stomach clenched as I scanned the statements. Strangers I had greeted politely at the reception now painted me as a dangerous woman. "They only saw what Juliet wanted them to see," I whispered. "Exactly," Carlos replied. "And that's why we counter it with the full picture. Remember the videos, the ones some guests recorded on their phones? Joseph's face lit up. Yes, we've got clips showing the argument, the slap, your refusal to hand over the keys. It's all there. Carlos smiled. Then we're not just defending your sanity, we're exposing theirs. The following week, the foundation of my defense began to take shape. Neighbors who had witnessed Juliet's late-night visits agreed to testify about her pressure tactics. The doctor who treated my bruised face after the wedding signed a statement, confirming physical assault. Even the florist where I had worked offered testimony about my consistent financial responsibility. Piece by piece, we built a shield of truth. Still, the nights were hardest. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if Ethan ever paused to question Juliet's path. Did he truly believe I had lost my mind, or had he buried his doubts to protect his pride? One night, Lucy sat with me on the balcony. "Aunt Aurora," she said softly, "even if Ethan never admits the truth, this fight matters, not just for you, but for every senior who's been silenced. You're not just my aunt anymore. You're a voice for all of them." Her words steadied me. The hearing date approached like a storm cloud on the horizon, but unlike before, I no longer felt helpless. Surrounded by allies, armed with evidence, and guided by Carlos's steady counsel, I felt ready. Juliet had wanted to portray me as weak, confused, incapable. Soon she would see that the woman she tried to silence had found her strength, and this time I wasn't fighting alone. The courthouse loomed above me, its gray stone walls as cold as the situation that had dragged me here. Joseph walked on one side, Lucy on the other, each gripping my arms as though they could transfer their strength into me. Carlos carried the thick folder of documents we had prepared, his expression unreadable but confident. Inside the courtroom, Juliet sat beside Ethan. She wore a tailored navy suit, her hair swept into a sleek bun, a picture of composure. Only I could see the flicker of triumph in her eyes. Ethan, by contrast, looked pale, avoiding my gaze as if staring at the floor could erase the reality of what he was doing. The judge entered, and the proceedings began. Juliet's attorney wasted no time. "Your Honor, we are here today because Mrs. Hughes has demonstrated repeated irrational behavior. She verbally attacked my clients on their wedding day, attempted to sabotage their future, and has since displayed paranoia and delusional tendencies. We are petitioning for a court-appointed guardian to manage her affairs." The words struck me like stones. I sat tall, refusing to flinch, but inside my heart pounded. Carlos rose, his voice steady. "Your Honor, what my colleague describes as irrational behavior is in fact a mother defending herself from financial exploitation. We will present evidence of physical assault against Mrs. Hughes, witness testimony of coercion, and video recordings that tell a story far different from the one painted here today." Gasps rippled through the courtroom when Joseph projected the first video on a screen. There I was, standing in the ballroom, my voice trembling but firm as I refused to hand over my keys. The camera captured Juliet's hand flashing across my face, the audible gasp from guests, my stunned silence. The judge leaned forward, his brow furrowing. Juliet's composure cracked for the first time. She whispered furiously to her attorney, who shifted uncomfortably. Next came testimony from my neighbors, describing Juliet's visits, her thinly veiled threats, her campaign to portray me as unstable. Then my doctor confirmed the medical report of my injuries. Piece by piece, Carlos dismantled the fragile narrative Juliet had constructed. When it was my turn to speak, I rose slowly, gripping the edge of the table for balance. The courtroom hushed. "Your Honor," I began, "I never wanted to be here. I wanted to believe that family love could withstand greed. But when my daughter-in-law slapped me in front of 130 people, because I refused to surrender my home, I realized that silence would only invite more abuse. I am 68 years old. I am not senile. I am not incompetent. I am a woman who has worked all her life, paid every bill on time, and raised a son I thought would stand by me. Instead, he stands against me. That is painful, but it does not make me incapable. My voice trembled, but I did not falter. When I sat down, Lucy squeezed my hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. The judge called for a recess. As we filed out of the courtroom, Juliet shot me a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "This isn't over," she hissed under her breath. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something stir inside me. Hope, because now the truth was no longer confined to my apartment walls. It had been spoken aloud, recorded in transcripts, witnessed by strangers who could no longer be swayed by Juliet's charm. The battle was far from won, but I had survived the first strike. And in that survival I found strength I never knew I possessed. When the hearing adjourned, I returned home drained yet strangely lighter, as though a weight had shifted. The law had finally heard my voice, and while no verdict had been made, the tide seemed to be turning. That night, Joseph arrived with dinner, homemade stew and a loaf of bread. Lucy brought tea and insisted on staying over, claiming she didn't want me alone after such a long day. I didn't argue. For the first time in months, I welcomed their presence not as protection, but as companionship. Meanwhile, Ethan's silence haunted me. He had barely spoken in court, never once meeting my eyes. I wondered if, beneath Juliet's influence, some part of him still remembered the boy who once held my hand when thunderstorms frightened him. But perhaps that boy had long since vanished. The next morning, Carlos called with news. "Aurora," he said, his tone brisk but reassuring, "the judge has ordered an evaluation. A court-appointed psychologist will visit you at home to assess your mental capacity. This is standard in such cases, but I want you prepared." Prepared. The word echoed. What could one ever do to prepare for a stranger coming to decide whether you were sane enough to live your own life? I spent the following days tidying my apartment, not because it was messy, but because I wanted every corner to reflect stability. The plants on my balcony glistened with fresh water. The books on my shelves were neatly aligned. Even the photographs on the walls, snapshots of a life lived with dignity, seemed to speak silently. This woman is not incompetent. She is alive, aware, and strong. When the psychologist arrived, she introduced herself as Dr. Patel, a woman with kind eyes behind square glasses. She spoke gently, asking about my daily routine, my finances, my medical history. I answered calmly, truthfully. She asked me to recall dates, solve small problems, explain my decisions. Each answer came without hesitation. At the end, she closed her notebook. "Mrs. Hughes, you are sharper than many people half your age. I will be submitting my report to the court." Relief washed over me like cool water. Still, I knew Juliet would not surrender easily. 2 weeks later, rumors began to spread. Neighbors whispered about me in the market, their voices tinged with doubt. Juliet had been busy, painting me as a manipulative woman who had turned the community against her out of jealousy. Some believed her lies. Others avoided me, unsure what to think. One evening, as I returned from the foundation's office, I found graffiti scrawled on my apartment door. "Crazy old witch." Lucy insisted on scrubbing it off while Joseph changed the lock. I stood frozen, staring at the hateful words until they disappeared under soap and water. "This is what they want," Joseph said gently, "to make you doubt yourself again. Don't let them." But as I lay in bed that night, I realized the battle was no longer confined to the courtroom. It had seeped into my community, into the very walls of my home. And yet, instead of despair, I felt fire. Juliet had tried to silence me with slaps, with lawsuits, with rumors. Now she tried with fear, but I was done living in fear. The next day, I contacted a journalist who had reached out after the videos went viral. "I'm ready to talk," I told her. If Juliet wanted a war, then a war she would have. But this time the battleground would be truth, and the whole world would be watching. The television studio buzzed with nervous energy. Bright lights, cameras, microphones, all waiting to capture my words. Joseph sat in the audience, Lucy beside him, her hand clenched around his for courage. Carlos stood backstage, reviewing notes like a general before battle. The journalist, Elena Martinez, greeted me with a firm handshake. Her eyes conveyed both professionalism and compassion. Aurora, thank you for agreeing to share your story. Millions of viewers will be watching tonight. Are you ready? I've been silent too long, I replied. It's time people hear what really happened. When the red light blinked on, Elena began. Good evening. Tonight we bring you the story of Aurora Hughes, a woman whose stand against financial abuse has sparked national debate. She turned to me. Aurora, 6 months ago you were accused of irrational behavior. You were even petitioned to be declared incompetent. Tell us, how did this all begin? I inhaled deeply. It began with trust. Trust in my son and in the woman he chose to marry. But trust, when placed in the wrong hands, becomes a weapon. Juliet wanted my apartment. When I refused to sign over the keys, she slapped me in front of 130 guests at her own wedding. That slap wasn't just an attack on me. It was an attack on every senior who has ever been told their dignity doesn't matter. A hush fell over the studio. Even through the glare of the lights, I could see tears glistening in the eyes of some crew members. Elena leaned forward. And what followed? They tried to destroy me. I continued. They spread rumors, manipulated neighbors, filed petitions. They wanted to declare me unfit so they could seize everything I'd built in my life. But I kept records. I sought legal help. And I discovered something powerful. The truth may take time, but it always finds its voice. Carlos joined me on stage to explain the legal details, how Juliet's lies had unraveled, how the court-ordered evaluation had proved my competence, how the viral videos had shifted public opinion. His words were precise, but it was the emotion in the audience that told me the message was landing. Near the end of the program, Elena asked, "Do you have a message for your son if he is watching tonight?" The question pierced me. I looked into the camera, as if Ethan himself were on the other side. Ethan, you are my son. I will always love you, but love does not mean surrendering dignity. If you want a relationship, it must be built on respect, not on lies or manipulation. The door to my heart is open, but only if you walk through it with honor. The studio erupted in applause when the cameras cut. Elena hugged me tightly. Aurora, your courage will change lives. That night, as I returned home, hundreds of messages already flooded my phone. Seniors thanking me for giving them a voice. Children apologizing for never understanding their parents' struggles. Strangers calling me brave. For the first time, I understood that my story was bigger than me. It wasn't just about Ethan or Juliet anymore. It was about every elder who had ever been silenced. And I had just told the world we will be silent no longer. The days after the television interview passed in a blur. My phone rang constantly. Journalists, activists, lawyers, even strangers who wanted to share their own painful experiences. For the first time in my life, I felt the weight of a new responsibility to transform my private survival into public service. Joseph came to my apartment one evening with a folder stuffed full of clippings. "Aurora," he said, laying the papers across my kitchen table, "do you realize what's happening? You've become a symbol. People need more than your story. They need your leadership." Lucy added softly, "You can't let this energy fade away. If you don't create something now, others will step in and twist your message." I looked at their eager faces. My heart, still bruised from betrayal, trembled at the idea. But deep inside, a seed of determination had already taken root. Within weeks, I filed the paperwork to establish the Aurora Hughes Foundation for the Protection of Seniors. The name felt strange at first, almost too personal. Yet Carmen, the woman I hired as coordinator, reminded me, "Aurora, attaching your name gives the cause authenticity. People trust you because you lived through it." We began with modest resources. 2 small rooms in a shared office building, donated desks, a phone line and a website built by Lucy's former student. But soon letters and donations started arriving. Survivors wanted guidance. Families sought mediation. Volunteers offered skills. Our first success came with Margaret, a 74-year-old whose son had sold her car without permission. Carlos and a pro bono lawyer guided her through legal recovery. 3 months later, she stood outside our office with tears of joy, holding the keys to a new car she had bought herself. "Aurora," she told me, "you taught me that boundaries are not cruelty, but survival." Stories like hers fueled us. Joseph began giving lectures in community centers about recognizing manipulation. Lucy designed workshops to teach seniors digital literacy so they could protect themselves from scams. Carmen coordinated caseworkers who visited elders in their homes, ensuring they were not isolated. I spent long nights drafting proposals for government support. To my surprise, doors opened. The television interview had given me credibility. Senators invited me to testify about elder abuse. Newspapers published my op-eds. Soon our foundation wasn't just helping individuals, it was shaping national policy. Still, challenges remained. Every success story was shadowed by new cases of pain. Families torn apart, parents deceived by their own children, seniors too ashamed to speak up. Sometimes, after listening to a victim's story, I would close my office door and cry silently. Healing others didn't mean my own wounds had vanished. One evening, Lucy found me staring at Ethan's photograph. "Do you ever regret going public?" she asked. I shook my head slowly. "No, because even if Ethan never forgives me, even if Oliver grows up without knowing me, at least this suffering wasn't wasted. At least it saved others." Lucy squeezed my hand. "That's why you inspire us. You turned pain into purpose." By the end of the year, our foundation had helped over 200 seniors reclaim homes, savings, or at least their dignity. The walls of our office were covered with thank you letters, photos, and certificates of appreciation. But for me, the true reward was subtler. I could sleep again. My body, once poisoned by stress, felt lighter. My voice grew stronger. My back stood straighter. The apartment that had been the scene of so much conflict transformed into a sanctuary. Ethan's old room became my office, filled with files, books, and letters. Where once I had feared losing everything, I now built something enduring. The Aurora Hughes Foundation was no longer just an organization. It was a declaration, a promise, a shield, and it all began because one day, I decided a slap would not define me. Success brought visibility, but it also stirred new storms. The more the foundation grew, the more Ethan tried to reappear in my life, not with apologies, but with demands. The first call came 6 months after the interview. His voice carried that same impatient tone I remembered all too well. "Mom, people at work treat me differently now. Do you realize what your story did to me? You humiliated me." I swallowed the pain. "Ethan, I didn't humiliate you. I told the truth. What humiliated you were your own actions." He hung up on me. The second call came when Oliver was born. "Mom, you're a grandmother now," Ethan announced flatly. "If you want to see him, you'll need to help us financially. Babies are expensive." My heart ached at the thought of a grandson I might never hold. Still, I answered firmly, "I will not buy my place in his life with money. If Juliet and you want me present, it must be with respect, not conditions." That call also ended abruptly. The third attempt was more desperate. Juliet had left him, taking Oliver and half of their possessions. Ethan's voice cracked through the phone. "Mom, you have to help me. I've lost everything." This time my reply surprised even me. "Ethan, I gave you life, love, and years of support. What you lost is not because of me. It's because you never learned responsibility. My dignity matters as much as my grandson. Until you understand that, I cannot help you." When I hung up, I realized it was the first time in my life I had ended a conversation with him on my terms. A bittersweet liberation, yet the subject of Oliver could still make me cry. 14 months old, a stranger to me. The few photographs I had were gone, taken by Juliet when she left. To fill the void, I created a trust fund for his future education. Carlos managed it carefully. Whether he knows you or not, Aurora, he said gently. This will be your silent gift to him. Amelia, my closest confidant, tried to soothe me. When he's older, Oliver may seek his own truth, and when that day comes he will find the courage to meet you. Her words gave me hope, but they didn't erase the ache. Some nights I lay awake wondering if Oliver would ever know the story behind the shadow that fell on his childhood. And yet, amid this grief, I noticed something extraordinary. My body was healing. Insomnia faded. Headaches disappeared. My doctor, Dr. Hernandez, marveled at my progress. Aurora, your blood pressure is perfect. Your stress levels resemble those of someone 10 years younger. Even your posture has changed. Do you see what happens when you cut toxic stress from your life? He was right. For the first time in decades, I felt strong. My steps were steady, my voice firm, my decisions clear. The flower shop where I once worked had closed, but that loss became a doorway. I joined neighbors in building a community garden. Teaching others about medicinal plants and organic growth reminded me that life, like soil, can heal when nurtured. My new routine filled every week. 3 days at the foundation, 2 days visiting seniors who needed comfort. Weekends spent drafting my second book, a practical guide to recognizing and preventing family manipulation. Ethan's old room, once a battlefield of memory, was now a creative office lined with photos, thank you letters, and university diplomas from lectures I had given. But perhaps the greatest gift was this: becoming a mentor to women who, like me, had been broken and needed someone to remind them that survival was not only possible, it could be beautiful. Courage had cost me a son, but it had given me a mission, and that mission was worth everything. 6 months ago, Margaret, 74, walked into the foundation with trembling hands. Her son had sold her car without permission to pay off gambling debts. For 3 months we worked together, legal steps, therapy, support groups. Last week she sent me a photo of herself, radiant, sitting in the driver's seat of a new car she bought with her recovered savings. Her letter read, Aurora, you taught me that setting boundaries is not cruelty, it's survival. You showed me that self-love is not selfishness, it's a necessity. And you proved it's never too late to stand tall. Reading her words, I felt the pain of my own past finally transforming into something greater. Not revenge, not bitterness, but purpose. My story had no fairy tale ending where all wounds were magically healed. Ethan had not returned to me with heartfelt apologies. Oliver was still a distant dream, and yet I had something better. I had authenticity. I had reclaimed dignity. I had built a legacy that outlived pain. Sometimes the most profound act of love is to walk away from those who persist in hurting you. If I could whisper to the Aurora who walked into that wedding ballroom 2 years ago, I would tell her, brace yourself, what you're about to endure will be agonizing. But on the other side waits a life more genuine than you could ever imagine. Peace will come, not the fragile peace of silence, but the steady peace of self-respect. Now at 70, my life is fuller than ever. Tomorrow I will meet senators to discuss new legislation for protecting seniors from family exploitation. Next week we open our 3rd regional center. Next month I begin filming a national documentary series to shed light on abuse that too often hides in plain sight. Do I regret what I did that night at the wedding? No. I regret the years I endured quietly. I regret the nights I convinced myself that sacrifice was the price of motherhood. But the moment Juliet slapped me, something inside me woke up, and I refused to go back to sleep. As I finish these reflections, I sit at my balcony, gazing at the plants I once watered while carrying unspeakable shame. Today they bloom as I do, alive, resilient, unashamed. I have learned that endings are not always losses. Sometimes they are liberations. I have discovered that true family is chosen, just as much as it is inherited. And I have proven that it is never ever too late to rewrite your story. To those who ask if I miss Ethan, my answer is simple. I miss the boy he once was, not the man who chose manipulation over love. And to those who ask if I will ever forgive, yes, I already have. Forgiveness is for me, not for him. It is my gift to myself, the key that unlocked my future. And to you listening now, perhaps seeing your own reflection in my journey, remember this: you are not disposable. You are not powerless. And you are never too old to demand dignity. This is not the end of my story. It is the beginning of a new one. So I ask you, dear listener, did my story touch you? Which city are you listening from tonight? Share it in the comments. I'd love to know where my voice has reached. If my journey resonated with you, consider supporting this channel so I can keep bringing you stories of courage, survival, and renewal. Your kindness fuels this mission. On your screen now, you'll see 2 more life stories that I deeply recommend. Each one holds lessons worth remembering. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Until we meet again, thank you for sharing this space with me. With love, with respect, with truth,